And that's what Stephen was talking about this morning in the office. Since Genning mentioned the Gospel of Matthew, and you had mentioned that you wanted to come to class with a set of questions, but life's troubles got in the way and
totally erased.
Yeah. And so I think maybe we can connect these two together, and then other people. Before perhaps we can tackle these two questions, let me, Kendra, tell you a story. When I was in Iran, we had these two singers. They were very, very popular, and they had great voices. One's name was Dariush, the other was Sattar. Dariush had this voice that had this natural, organic echo to it. It's like when he speaks, it's like gold is speaking to you. The other one had a higher tone voice, and it was very velvety. It was like silk. So I kind of grew up on those two musicians or singers. Then around the age, I think 19 or so, good morning. And, you know, most of you know the story. I went to this gathering and I met this strange man. He had a bushy mustache. His name was Hussein. And there was something very off-putting about him. He was far too aggressive. He was built big, so he had just dominating presence. I didn't really like him that much, but I loved my father. I still do. He's still alive. And so when Hussein mentioned that he has these gatherings where he talks about politics and religion, my father asked him immediately, so what days do you have these gatherings? And so we started going to these gatherings. I would just go there for my father's sake, you know, not being so interested in philosophy, religion, the social upheaval that was taking place in Iran. But there was something about him, there was something about Hussein, and you don't really know how this happens. It's what Rumi, the Persian Sufi poet, calls a thief at night. I remember summertime, because we didn't have air conditioning, we used to sleep on rooftops. And one morning we get up, we go downstairs to make some tea and some breakfast, only to realize that all the carpets are gone. You know, Persian rugs and silverware and those things. And my mom was very, very hysterical when she saw that. My father, on the other hand, he said, man, these thieves were very creative, not a sound. You know, they took everything without waking any one of us up. It was a 3-story house. And so I think the 6 months of being in these gatherings, the ideas of Hussein, the presence of Hussein, slowly seeped into me. And I didn't know this at the time. I mean, oftentimes when you go out with someone, you just go out with them casually. And after 5-6 months of going out with them, you realize one morning when you wake up, like 2 or 3 in the morning, you say, I think I just don't like them. I think I love them. And then you try to kind of like a good detective to backtrack and figure out when exactly did you fall in love. And the truth is you don't know. You know, you spend so much time with this person and this person grew, you know, on you. And like a thief at night, you know, you had promised to yourself that you would never again fall in love, you know, because the moment someone has your heart, it means they have power over you. You've been there, you've done that. You know how it feels to be in pain, to be hurt, to be disappointed, to be betrayed, and you say, never again will I do that. And lo and behold, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years pass by, and without your awareness, all of a sudden you wake up and you're in love. And the moment that happens, you realize that it's no longer a want relationship. I want to hang out with this person. It becomes a need relationship. I need to see them. I need to hear from them. And the moment it begins to become a need-based relationship, now you have longings and yearnings, sorrows that you had forgotten that existed inside you. And so you become, to some extent, a person who becomes religious. You don't worship God, but you worship this person. And through this person, you've been exposed to love. And love baptizes you. It makes you innocent. It makes you sincere. And your intentions are, for the most part, quite pure and clean and earnest. So I remember I was at the car wash washing this car. The hood of this white Honda had all this grease on it, and I used some degreaser, and all of a sudden I looked at my father and said, Hussein was right. Hussein has been right about everything. I don't know why I said that. I don't know at what point the ideas of Hussein, the presence of Hussein were now living inside me, but they were. And I called him that night, and I went to his house, and I had a chat with him, but I was a kid. I was a 19-year-old punk. I didn't know really anything from anything. I took everything literally, for the most part. And I stayed with him for the next 10 years. Only now I realize the sort of time he spent, the energy he spent on the three of us that were with him for all those years. I think after maybe 6 or 7 months of just seeing him privately, I remember one day going home, wanting to listen to some music. So I put my favorites, Sattar and Daryush. Persian culture is a sad culture because of our history. We have been brutalized by the Arabs, by the Turks, by the Afghans, by the French, by the English, by the Americans. Our culture has never seen respite or calm, free from political strife and exploitation for more than a few weeks. So when you have a very unhappy culture because they've been brutalized day after day after day, well, go back to something that Freud had mentioned, or something we talked about in this class, which is life is tough. It punches you on a daily basis. In fact, every single moment. And you can't just scream, because you'll end up in an institute. What you'll do is you'll try to take in the pains that have been imposed upon you, and then you create poetry with it. You create music with it. You go on a walk with it. You fall in love with it. But you have to somehow find a way to be a good Stoic. And Stoicism, if anything they have to teach us, is that you and I have no power over anybody. We have no power over the world. We have no power over the forces of the world. The moment you have a child, you'll have no power over your child. The moment you get into a relationship, you think you have power over your companion, but you really, really don't, unless you just want to break things off and just walk away. We have no power over anything except our emotions. But to be able to have power over emotions, which is what the world does, the world plays with you every single moment. You fall in love, you become indifferent. You are inspired, the inspiration goes away. You have a job, you're in a good mood, a customer comes in and craps all over you. You wake up, you go to sleep in a good mood, you wake up in a foul mood. That is the play of the wheel, play of life. And so they argue, since we can't change anything, perhaps you have the power to overcome negative emotions that toss you here and toss you there. But if you want to have power over your emotions, you need to be able to study your emotions. And to be able to study your emotions, you have to find yourself detached from this part of you that is so emotional. But to be able to do all of that, you need to be interested in yourself. And that is what Hussein did. He gave birth to a certain part of Amir Sabzavari. He was an infant. And so he protected that his own image. You know, like God creates an image and then he protects that image. When it comes to human beings, he injects his image. He breathes his own spirit in the human being, and metaphorically speaking. But he knows that the world is far too powerful. And he doesn't want his image, what he's created inside us, to be defiled so easily. So he goes to the deepest part of us. A part that the world has no power to get to touch. Reason has no power to get to touch. And so for the next 10 years, what Hussein did was to protect that part that he had invented, created. And it slowly blossomed, you know. But the point I was trying to get to was the following. After about 6 or 7 months of hanging out with Hussein, one day I go home and I say, I want to listen to some music. I put Sattar and Daryush on, and I realize, no, they're not really speaking to this new part of me. I want traditional music. Both our pop music and traditional music are equally sad, but the traditional music, the lyrics, the poems are by poets such as Hafez, Rumi, Sa'di, Nizami, Baba Tahir. And these are all Sufi poets. These are all people who are very much like us, normal, ordinary people, walking, quacking on a daily basis. All of a sudden they feel something, they experience something, and they say, no. You know, unlike Jesus in the Gospels, they just leave everything. And they say, maybe I should just go somewhere, figure out who I am, what I am. I don't want to be part of the social construct. I don't want the matrix to govern me. I don't want to work for metacortex. You know, this invisible corporation that injects all these desires, and then desires turn into pursuits, and pursuits have nothing but ambitions in it. You know, I don't want to be contaminated like that. I want my life to belong to me. And the point I'm trying to make is, when you're young, you have the desire to invite all sorts of people into your life. And by people, I mean not just human beings. You bring about music, you go to parks, and you're willing to have your eyes roam around and see anyone and anything. You don't really care how they impact you because you're young, you're agile, you can overcome things very, very easily, and there is nothing about you that you want to protect. As you get a little older, and as you begin to realize there are certain parts of you that, for you at least, they seem to be sacred, they feel sacred, you become very discriminate in the sense that you don't just want to invite anybody. So you trash all the pop music, and in their place, you bring in traditional music. So the problem with that is the following. When Hussein passed away a couple years ago because he had cancer and eventually cancer took his life, he has a wife, Shadia, and she's also a professor of art, history, religion, philosophy, humanities in Sacramento. She got married to him when she was, I think, 20. They were married for about 40 years. And sometimes I say to myself, okay, you know, you got married at the age of 20, you were with a man for about 40 years, he's now dead. You're still a human being, you're a woman, or you're a man, you're a widowed. You're going to suffer loneliness. You want someone to talk to. You want someone to lay next to. You want someone to hold you. I mean, the human body is really this mysterious machine that sometimes has nothing to do with your soul. It's just the body desires to be touched, to be held, to be caressed. And I say to myself, well, will she ever find a companion? Will she ever be interested in a companion? Of course, in our culture, that's a big no. But her case is very unique in the sense that, you know, I've been around for about 60 years. I haven't met anyone like Hussein. And sometimes I say to myself, she met someone profoundly unique. She found a young man who had these goals in his life, and he wouldn't sacrifice those goals for anyone or anything. Where is she going to go to find a man like Hussein, even as a friend? And the answer is no one. And so part of the difficulty is, if you have ever encountered anyone, if you're like a Plato at the age of 17, and you ran into a Socrates, and Socrates died 5 years later, the truth is it's going to be so hard for you to find another Socrates that can replace. And what Socrates does, he makes you focused. You know, he is like this weed killer. He's trying to create a rose inside you, and he also knows that there are weeds that are going to grow and suffocate the rose. So you go to him on a daily basis. You keep in touch with him on a daily basis. And that does what? Well, he acts like a weed killer. If there are anything that's going to overpower the rose and suffocate the rose, Socrates is right there to take care of it. Now, which means that if you can't find another Socrates, you are on your own. You are going to be profoundly lonely. You're always going to be longing, yearning, searching for someone who can replace Socrates, who passed some years ago. And there's a good chance that you won't be successful. That means that if Socrates used to nourish you, the only person who cannot nourish you is you. But now you go to bookstores, now you go to workshops, now you go to lectures, but you want someone to smell like Socrates, to taste like Socrates, to feel like Socrates, and you won't find anyone. And then you go home disappointed, and you say, yes, they were intellectually stimulating, but I want to be touched. I want to grow wings. And just because someone is able to kind of string a couple of words together and create moments of inspiration, I'm not looking for that. Let me tell you a story, and then we'll go to Bethany, is it? You have a question or two or three? Okay. First of all, getting my apologies for the Gospel of Matthew. I have forgotten that particular story. You said wheat, not weed. Like, is it W-E-E-D or, okay. I don't remember that particular narrative in the Gospels. I trust that you're accurate, it's just my own memory. I think if you were to look at the story symbolically, if what you're saying is accurate, I'm going to change it a little bit. The authors, whoever wrote this particular gospel, either was not paying attention, or maybe I'm just an arrogant man, and it may be both true. If you examine, or if you symbolize the interior of the human being, and if you look at the human being as an entity that lives within the bosom or cradle of society, and if society offers you nothing but trash, advertisement, trash, movies, trash, most of the conversations, trash, the way people desire for things, are ambitious for things, they're all trash. So people have a good amount of trash inside them. I'm not even talking about addiction. I'm not talking about coming from, say, a parental environment where parents are not there to protect you. So a good amount of you is broken. All of a sudden you run into a rose, and this particular rose happens to have a name called Jesus Christ. His name is Jesus, his last name is Christ, not because he had a last name, but because he was touched by something. It was Christos, it was anointed. Now, like anything else, when you have something, you want to share that something with other people. If you're like Snoop Dogg and you're in love with smoking weed, well, you go on TV and you advertise weed. If you have a good amount of negative emotions inside you, well, what do? You want to look at your contacts in your cell phone and ask yourself, am I going to call Janet or am I going to call Josephine? Whose ears will be more receptive to my pains? So we are nothing but a bundle of advertisements, and we're looking for people out there who can be receptive or buy the things we have on the inside. So Jesus Christ, look at him symbolically as a rose. He looks at me and says, Amir Sabzari has a good amount of trash on the inside, but I see that there is this tiny little property on the inside. It's vacant. Nothing has occupied it. Maybe I can plant a seed in there. That seed will eventually, if protected, if nourished, will become a rose. Now, he plants this seed, but he also knows that weeds grow really, really fast. It's like Kevin. You know, he leaves the class on Monday. His brain is working, okay? And he has all these questions inspired within him. And he says, I'm going to keep these questions alive until I go to class on Wednesday and bombard him with all these inspired questions. That's a rose. He came to class simply for a grade. He leaves class not caring for the grade, only caring for these inspired questions. Okay? It doesn't have to do with his ambition. It doesn't have to do with his race. It doesn't have to do with his age. It has nothing to do with anything. There is this part in him that has been untapped, remained dormant, but now it has come to life. What happens? He gets a phone call. What's the phone call? It's valuable, but it's trash. What happens to the questions? The questions are consumed, suffocated by the trash. And so he comes to class, he raises his hand and says, you know, I had some questions from Monday, can I ask? Sure. And all of a sudden, the moment his mouth opens to ask the questions, his memory goes back to the phone call that he received this morning. And he's at an age where he lacks the focus, rightly so. He's fragmented. He's like this trunk of a tree that has 50,000 different branches going all over the place. And he says, I'm sorry, but I just forgot. Now, if you have a seed of a rose planted inside you, there are a couple of things you need to understand. Whoever planted that seed inside you, lots of effort, lots of sacrifice, lots of nourishment. And then, because it was fresh, because it was new, something really interesting happened. You liked this seed. Once in a while, there was this aroma coming off of the seed, and you liked the way it smelled. So what did you do? You called this person, you emailed this person, you texted this person, you did all sorts of things. But then you assume that, well, this seed can grow on its own, that it's powerful enough not to be trashed. And so your focus, and it's true for all of us, and your focus slowly became contaminated, you know. And so you said, yes, I can do A, B, C, D, and at night I can go back and tend to the seed. And little by little, if in the past you spent 5 hours on the seed and 2 hours on the trash of life, now it's reversed. Now you spend 5 hours on the trash and 2 hours on the seed. Then it becomes 6 hours on trash and 1 hour on the seed. Then you spend 6 hours and 59 minutes on trash and 1 minute on the seed. And then one day you look yourself in the mirror and you say, you know, the trash in my life aren't bad. You know, I have a job, I have a companion, I have children, I have a nice car, I have all this wonderful stuff. But for some strange reason, I am not very happy and I don't know why. And to some extent, it's paradise lost. And there's a great story that, I don't know if it's in the Gospel of Matthew, Luke, or it's not in the Gospel of John, because in the Gospel of John, you don't have very many stories. It's about a farmer, and all of you know the story. The farmer has a bag, and the bag has a hole. The bag is full of seeds. What do farmers do? Well, we're talking about 2,000 years ago. We don't have tractors yet. We don't have bulldozers yet. So you have a guy, and it's the Middle East. Jesus comes from the Middle East. And so what you have is the ground being really, really hard. I mean, just think about the metaphor, the symbolism. The ground is really, really hard, and you have to use a shovel or an axe or something to till the ground. That's tough. People have no choice but to become hard in the middle of life, because if you're soft, if you're sensitive, you're pushed around by life. So at the age of 60, when you go out on a date, you can't be sensitive and fall in love in 10 minutes, because the recovery period is going to be like a lifetime. If you're 20 and life breaks you, the next day you're fine. So you have to toughen up for life, and that is what the ground is. So whoever the farmer is in anybody's life, when they encounter us or when we encounter them, there is something about them that we enjoy. We don't really know what it is. I mean, I doubt very much that Plato knew who Socrates was. All that I think that Plato felt was, there is something weird about this man. He looks ugly, physically he's just looking like a beast, but there is something about his interior that's so captivating. And so, should you show some interest in this farmer, and should the farmer show some interest in you, well, the tilling begins. In other words, the tilling means he has to remove all the desires that have nothing to do with what he has on the inside. The only thing that the farmer is interested is finding a place inside you to put these seeds so roses can grow. Do you see? But as long as your ground is filled with trash, you can't do much. If it's hard, you can't do much. Right? So what you have then is this farmer walking around. He talks to people, but some people will never allow anyone to be planted. They will never allow anyone to plant anything inside them. Imagine if you've come from an abusive environment. When you go out with someone, that person, you can feel they like you, but you have been so hurt in your life in the past 20, 30, 40 years that you will never allow this person close enough so that when you go home, you have his image in your head. You will never allow that. Because the moment his image goes inside you and you have an intimate, emotional relationship with this man, you open yourself to hurt, to pain, and you will never allow that. So what you have in the Gospel of Matthew or Mark or John is that Jesus walks to certain people, Socrates, doesn't matter who it is, your father, okay, talks to you, but you are at a certain place in life where you are hard, you're like concrete. It doesn't matter what he says, it doesn't matter how he says it. It's never going to enter into you. And what happens when a seed just remains on top of the ground? Well, the sun hits it. It slowly becomes a victim to time, to wind. It just dies. Now, there are these other people that Jesus or Socrates or whoever you idolize in your life is walking, and they talk to some people. And those people, in fact, have the capacity to receive the seed. There is only one problem. They will never allow or have the capacity to have the ground tilled deep enough so that the seed can remain hidden from the vultures. He has questions. They are good questions. But those questions don't live deep within him. Because if they did, he would have never forgotten those questions. But those questions live on the surface, which means that at any time, the vultures of life can come down, get those questions, trash them, and replace those questions with the troubles of life. He is a victim, he just doesn't know it yet. And it has nothing to do with the white man or the black man or the brown man. It has nothing to do with the 14th century or the 21st century. This is what we call the human condition. Then he runs into these other groups of people and he digs. And they say, dig, it's okay. It's painful, but عشق در دریای غم غمناک نیست. It is sorrowful, but there is something delicious. There is something joyful about this particular sorrow. It's like your mom has cancer, your dad has cancer, and you love your father, and you are angry because this disease is going to rob them of themselves before this disease robs them of their life. And every time you go to your father, to your mother, and you see them in pain, it's an agonizing place to be, but you take care of them. And your love baptizes, your care baptizes what you see. And so you do it joyfully. You do it lovingly. And so what happens is sorrow turns into joy. It doesn't mean that sorrow goes away, but sorrow becomes meaningful. You don't need to be medicated. You don't need to get drunk. You're not angry. Okay? Add to it the fact that when you slowly see your father or mother passing away, it makes you more reflective. Who am I? What am I? What is meaningful? What lacks meaning? What sort of people do I want in my life? What sort of questions do I want to pose to other people as well as myself? And so he plants, the farmer plants those seeds inside those people. He tries on all people. And that's the thing you need to understand. When, for example, you find Malcolm X or you find Jesus, or you find Mahatma Gandhi, all these people saying, whoever finds my door and whoever knocks on my door and to whomever my door opens, they are more than welcome to sit at my table and break bread with me. Jesus walks with the callous as well as those who have some capacities, as well as those who have a good amount of capacity. He tries all categories of people. But the only people who are able to receive him and receive him well are those who allow him or any teacher to dig a huge hole inside them, plant the seed, and then have the person who dug water the seed on a daily basis, give it some light, protect it. If there are any weeds growing around it, pull out the weed, trash the weed, tend to the seed. When the seed, now here's the thing about seeds, you assume that just because you see this tiny little green sprouting out of the earth, the job is done. No. Because what you have, especially with the sort of, I suppose, seeds that people like Malcolm or Martin or Jesus or Muhammad or the Buddha want to plant inside us, it takes time for them to become a huge trunk, so that no wind, no rain, no storm, no hurricane can uproot. So they have to stand by and keep watch until they have taken root inside you. Now, I don't know, as an experiment, I think what you should do is go to Home Depot, buy a 1 gallon anything, take it out of the bucket, and look at the roots. The bottom part is mostly soil. The roots are just on the top. Then go get a 50-gallon redwood and then remove it from its bucket. And you realize the roots are everywhere. It's at the very bottom of the soil, middle of the soil, top of the soil. If the seed has taken root in your toes, in your ankles, in your knees, in your hips, in your chest, in your head, you're good to go. Nothing will ever get rid of that trunk or the seed inside you. But it has to be in every part of you. Otherwise, you will forget. And life has too much power. It'll break everything that's valuable inside you.